Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Behind the Green Screen. As you can see, there's no green screen behind me. And I don't know why this thing is going all wonky. I'm not having it today because I'm not, I'm not, I'm not about to fuss around with any technology. It needs to work when I need it to right now, okay? Because I'm on a timeline right here, okay? All right. So yeah, so for this episode, um, the book that I'm going to feature is sort of a how-to book. It's not some it's sort of a how-to book, but it's more like there's these pocket books that not pocketbook, but pocket book, like small books. And there's a series. They're not ghost written exactly because you know who the authors are or the writers. But what it does is it features a very complex subject and it sort of simplifies it so that you can understand it. So, like I said, there's a series of books. There's one on ethics. They're all called 101s. Like, so it's like a crash college course on these subjects. So I have ethics 101, I have philosophy 101, and then I have this one. Now, the book that I'm going to feature for this episode, I got, um, I don't know really why I got it because I'm not really going to embrace this subject all that much. But as an artist, you can't help but be curious about other genres and, about if you can master them or at least experience them so that you can, sort of use whatever you've learned about that particular genre and sort of apply it to your area of expertise. So, for example, for me, I'm always about exploring other artistic genres. Writing is my thing, writing is my purpose, it's what I do. But I do get curious about other art forms or expressions of art. For example, photography. So, photography was one of those things where I just taught myself. I bought a whole bunch of how to books and I bought an old camera and I experimented. And of course, I took a class in undergrad, but I experimented and I sort of understood lighting and composition and all of that. And I still, use some of that for what I do with this YouTube channel, so there's that. And then I think I mentioned in a previous episode that I took ballroom dance lessons, and I did for I think it was about 2 years. I There was a cute couple that rented a dance studio down the street from my house. It was a husband and wife couple. Of course, say couple, duh. Well, no, to be fair, they were married. They were a husband and wife, and so I was taking lessons from the husband and but his wife who was German, and that's where the whole I was trying to learn German from. I wanted to learn German so that she and I could converse and I would get practice. But German is one of those languages that is exhausting because the words are so long and you sort of trip over yourself. Now there are words that are very similar to the English language in German, like apfel, apple. But yeah, it takes a lot of practice and understanding the grammar and the whole nine yard. It really does require dedication and effort. So there was that. And when it comes to music, which is going to be the subject of this episode, when it comes to music, my relationship to music began with disco. When I lived in Brooklyn as a kid, we lived in one of those row houses that have 4 floors. And my second cousin, lived on one of the floors. And he didn't like me for whatever reason. I was just a child. He didn't like my mother. He didn't like me. But that's a long story. But in any event, he used to blast his disco music, Donna Summer, Sylvester. Yeah. Um, um, uh, um, all kinds of old like disco that you really don't hear anymore. He never played ABBA. I can say that, not that I remember. It was more like R&B disco. So that was my first introduction to music, but it did not click that instruments made that music. I know this sounds weird, but for me as a kid, it's just music coming out of a speaker. You don't know how it's made, you don't know what's involved. It's just music that makes you dance. And so my interest in playing an instrument did not occur until I hit middle school. I was in a it wasn't experimental, but it was a very new school. It was so new, like it was just built. Everything was spanking brand new. And so they did a lottery to bus kids from all over Queens, from the affluential areas and the not so affluent areas. Affluent. Yes, right. From the affluent from the affluent sections of Queens to the not so affluent sections, like where I was from. So they bust all these little kids and put them in the school, Louis Armstrong Middle School. I think it was IS 57. I can't remember. IS stands for intermediary school. That's the way they broke it down. There's PS and then there's IS and then there's HS. So in that school, like I said, everything was spanking brand new, and they were sort of exposing us to things that we would normally ordinarily be exposed to in public school. And but at a higher, more quality scale, because everything was brand new. So I started learning keyboard. They had like electronic pianos. And so in middle school, you played, whatever little songs that they taught you. And then when I got to high school, I continued taking those types of classes, well, because they're elective, but I really did want to learn how to play the piano. It was, very interesting to me. But there was always this disconnection between me and reading the music, because I know there was a whole bunch of theory and whole kind of stuff. And high school is not about, well, at least the class that I was in was not about teaching you music theory. It was basically like teaching you how to read simple sheet music and how to translate that onto the keyboard. But there was always like this disconnect for me. Like I would hesitate, or I would, and it always drove me nuts when I hit the wrong key. But something that was very interesting about playing the piano is that the sound of the keys was something that, how can I put this? Okay, so the best way that I can explain how I was better at music is when you look at Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, they were blind. So, of course, naturally, they could not read any sheet music, but they played by ear. And that's what I'm able to do. So, at the time, one of the really popular shows that showed up, I think it was on Mondays, was MASH at 8 o'clock. And MASH had this theme song. And the theme song, when you think about it, is very simple. Da 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 da. Right? So I don't know what got into my head, but I started playing around on the piano, and I managed to play out the theme from MASH just by remembering the tune and then fooling around with the keyboard with the keys to find the right note for whatever part of the song. So that's how I taught myself how to play MASH. And probably if I had a keyboard in front of me, I'd probably be able to remember how to play it now. So that, but it was one of those things, like it's a one semester thing. And, it wasn't really something that I was interested in actively pursuing. It was just something like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. It'd be interesting to learn. But that was the extent. All right. So the thing is that when I was a kid, and I wished I could give you the year. Normally I say picture it, da 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 da, but I can't really remember. But I want to say it was 1979, right? It was 1979. And my mom was dating this guy who would eventually become my half brother's father, right? He was a boyfriend at the time. And he had relatives. His father lived in Connecticut. It's just funny how certain things come full circle because I wound up living in Connecticut for 30 years, for over 30 years. But so my mother's boyfriend always liked to take us for Sunday drives. Sometimes he would take us up into Westchester County, and just for nowhere in particular, but I really always enjoyed those car rides. And then one day we went in the car, and before we knew it, we were in Connecticut visiting his father. His father was living in what would be, I guess at the time, was probably one of the really nicer apartments. That was my first time seeing a parquet floor, you know? And it was, I remember it like I remember the apartment. We came in, and I think it was the living room, and then straight ahead was the doors to like this little terrace that they had. But then I remember turning my head to the side, and there was this strange object that was propped up so ostentatiously in, I think, what was the hallway that led to the bedrooms. It was like right off to the side, but you couldn't miss it because when you came in, it was right there. And he had it placed so lovingly on this tabletop in its brace, or stand, in its stand. And I'd never seen this instrument before. I'd never heard of this instrument before. And I was just fascinated when I saw it. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's a violin." And that was my first introduction to the violin. And when he explained it to me, I said, "So wait a minute, you take this thing and you do like this against these strings and you press and it gives you a key?" And he was just like, he says, and he played a little bit for me. Now, I want you to see how important that is for a little Black girl from Queens who lived basically in the ghetto, and how important it was for me to see a Black person pick up an instrument that would normally be seen with a white person or an Asian person. And hey, you can get mad at me as much as you want, but it is the God's honest truth. If we're, talking about stereotypes and how they're so awful, but the thing is that there are certain stereotypes that are absolutely true. And when it comes to a violin, 9 times out of 10, it's either a white person or an Asian person playing it. So for me, a little Black girl from Queens, seeing this Black man, this older Black man, show me this very sophisticated instrument, that is, I wish all kids could experience that, because then they would see that it is possible for you to learn this instrument, that it's not just for those people over there. We can learn it too. We have the ability to learn it. So I thought about that instrument, and it never left my mind, but it wasn't one of those things. I was really young, so it wasn't one of those things like I saw it and I was like, oh, I got to learn how to play it. It was like I saw it and I was like, that's kind of interesting. So flash forward 20 some odd years later, and I'm living in Colchester, Connecticut, which was one of the quintessential New England towns, in which there's a town green with a beautiful gazebo, and there's a main street, and it was one of those towns where there were certain families that dominated because they had been there practically since the town was settled. So like they may not have been on the board, on the town board, but they had great influence. It was one of those types of towns. And in the town, there was a music it opened up recently. It was new. It was a music place where you can get lessons, right? So whatever instrument you were interested in, you can, they had a teacher and they could teach you. So my mom at the time, she was trying to live out her childhood through my younger son because she always wanted to learn how to play the piano. But let me tell you something, there's no learning how to play piano in Guyana. And when you come over here as an immigrant, you are about learning to survive. You're not about learning to play some sort of fancy instrument that you'll never make money from. Just stating fact. So my mom always wanted to learn how to play the piano. And I noticed it, and she noticed it, that my younger son kind of like had a musical talent or a musical ability, was always singing or doing something. And so my mother said, you know what? I'm going to pay for him to have piano lessons. And so now here's the thing though. When you have more than one child, you cannot do for one without doing for the other. Otherwise, it creates this weird, um, you're pitting the children against each other for time, attention, and resources, right? You don't want to do that. So whatever you do for one, you should do for the other. And if they don't want to do it, that's fine. But you should always make it available. So when my mother was paying for piano lessons for my younger son, I said, well, we're going to be like the Partridge Family, and we're all going to learn how to play an instrument. I will rob Peter to pay Paul. And what I did, and that's what I did, I robbed Peter to pay Paul and got my older son guitar lessons. And for me, guess which lessons I got? That's right. Hold on. Now, this is not the violin that I learned on. This is another violin. Violins are, you go on eBay, violins are not all that expensive. It's when you're looking for style and quality, and they even have electric guitars now. They have with clear acrylic to make it look, really cool. Because, of all the instruments that are considered cool, violin is not one of them. So you got to make it hot. You got to make it interesting. So I've noticed that they've been doing very interesting things with violins, and including making them electric and, with a place where you can slip in the amplifier down at the bottom. So no, don't worry. I'm not going to play this because I haven't played or attempted to play in years, and this is not tuned. But the one thing that I learned from the violin was that the reason why this instrument is so complicated is because there are no frets. Now, if you've ever looked at a guitar, you know what frets are, is those bars with holes, not holes, but indents that are along the bridge, right? And those frets are there to tell you where to press your finger to get a particular key or particular note. With violin, there are no frets. So it's basically trying to trying to figure out where to slide your finger on this board, on this fingerboard, to find your keys. Right now, one thing that the reason why I put it down was, number one, is because I could not afford the lessons anymore. And number two, I wanted to start growing my nails, because the thing with playing the violin is that your nails have to be incredibly short. Even my nails right now are too long. You have to cut them down practically to the nub, because you don't want any obstruction as you press these strings to get the note that you need. And so it's a lot by ear, playing and finding the D. Ooh, this is I shouldn't have this here. All right. Okay. We're rolling. Okay, we're rolling. Okay. So you don't want anything to obstruct your ability to hit that note. And so a lot of it is by ear, finding out, starting with the D, if I remember correctly. And you use a pitch pipe. I do think I have a pitch pipe. I think I have a pitch pipe here. Yeah, I have yeah, this is rosin. This is rosin for the bow. All right, because you always want to rosin up your bow so that the deal with the friction so that it slides easier along the strings. And I used to have a really cool, I don't know what happened to the pitch pipe in um, my original violin. I honestly don't know where the hell it went to. And it's kind of disturbing that my violin and the pitch pipe disappeared. But in any event, you use a pitch pipe to tune this. Of course, you got to, tune the pegs up here, make sure you have the proper tension in order to get the right note. You start with the D and then you work your way until all the strings I don't even remember. I think this is D and yeah, but you have to tune the violin using a pitch pipe or this thing right here. This if it turns on, I don't even know if this thing works. Oh, it does because I've never I bought this when we had the pandemic thinking that we're on lockdown, this would be the perfect time to pick up the violin. So I went on eBay, I got this puppy, and then I got everything that you need, which includes this right here. All right, and this is how you this is a tuner. This is how you tune this. Okay, so I bought this and I do intend, and I don't know why this is going all wonky. It's sort of annoying, but I do intend to return back to this someday because I do like the violin. It is a very nice, challenging instrument, and it does go by ear. A lot of it goes by ear. So the reason why I bring all this up and I introduce you to my violin is because one of the books Ugh. One of the books that I bought was Music Theory 101. And this is by Brian Boone and Mark Schoenbrunn. And these are the pocketbooks that I talk about. So there's Music Theory 101. I have Philosophy 101, which I will cover in another episode, and have Ethics 101. As a matter of fact, the Philosophy 101 was extremely helpful when I was putting together curriculum for my classes. And I talked about this when I taught English composition. I tried to make things really interesting. So I would sort of incorporate philosophy. And a lot of the philosophy that I learned through that pocketbook. All right. So this is music theory. And I bought this because when you're trying to learn a different art form, it's very important that you learn the rules to that art form because once you learn the rules, you can break them, right? But you can't just go in with something without understanding what you do and what you can't do, what you should do and what you should not do. And that's where music theory comes in because it's all just jabber and sound and noise, but there's a science and math behind it. And I really did not have an appreciation for the science and the math until I got this book and I started reading it. And I was like, oh, no wonder I never really like it. It's well known that playing an instrument requires spatial ability. Spatial ability is the same ability that we use when we're trying to calculate math. And as I told you, I have I'm very horrible at math. But the thing is that it's all in my head, and I allow that phobia to sort of come in as sort of like an unnecessary roadblock to understanding. So these pocketbooks really do simplify music theory, and as I read it, there are some things that do if, okay, there are some things that do come to mind that I learned from class in high school when we were learning how to play the piano, and that's how to read music, right? So there's treble clef and there's bass clef. I always worked in treble clef. I don't ever remember playing music that required bass clef, right? And I do remember how she taught us, and I think it's how all kids learn how to understand the lines and where the notes fall. So it's like, um, for the spaces, it's FACE, and then for the lines, it's every good boy does fine. And that's how you know where the notes go, and you know how to step up and step down when you're playing the scales. And scales are very important too, right? So I'm reading this and I'm like, you musicians out there, okay, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. I'm going to say that right now, okay? Because just reading just the when I started reading this book and just reading the first number of pages, when it gets into the 18th and the 16th, and how you hold a note and all of that, I'm just like, I'm floored. I'm floored. And it's always fascinating. And, so whenever I hear, like when I used to teach, and a student would talk about that they were, they play in a band. And I'm like, what instrument do you play? I had one of my students when I was teaching English composition, he played the drums. And anybody feel free to correct me, but my understanding is that drummers are the most important instrument when you're playing in a band, in any kind of band, because the drums set the tempo and everybody plays with the tempo that the drummer sets. So if the drummer goes faster, all the other instruments have to follow. And if he goes slower, the same thing. All the other instruments that accompany that drum have to go the same tempo. Otherwise, it's cacophony of noise. It's chaos. So I just have a really great appreciation. Music theory. I'm not. I I don't know if I want to get too far in the weeds with learning music theory, because after all, it's not my cup of tea. It's not my thing. I don't plan to go out and join an orchestra or a rock band. But I think it does help a little bit if I'm not going for instruction and I need to relearn all of this all over again, and I go on YouTube or whatever. It's always good to have a book of reference, so that, say I go on a YouTube and I'm watching a video about, how to play two frets, you know, at the same time, which is basically fiddling, I found out. Like when people look at so-called people in Appalachia and they're playing the fiddle, it's not a fiddle. It's not like a separate instrument from the violin. And I found that out. It is basically a violin, but they're just playing it differently. And they may play a certain version that's a little bit smaller than a fourth fourth. This is a fourth violin. They come in quarters, right? So this is a fourth fourth, and I think that there's a third fourth, a second fourth, and a one fourth. I think, you know what? It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a dope beat to step. No, I'm sorry. All right. That was a little Eric B. and Rakim, in case you didn't catch that. But yeah, so the violins, they come in different sizes. And I think maybe for children to play, I can't remember why they come in different sizes. But a fiddle is basically a violin. They just play it differently, and they play it two strings at the same time, like two frets at the same time, and that's how they manage to have that distinctive sound of what's considered bluegrass. Okay. So yeah. So this is the book, Music Theory 101. You can find it everywhere. Get a used copy. That's what I did. Like I said, I if it's used, it's just as good. I can't foresee any missing pages or anything like that. Okay. But yeah, this really gets into the weeds. Like, I don't even know how to just process some of this because it really is sort of overwhelming, especially if you don't have proper practice of it, or you have the discussion of it in a classroom setting where you can learn from other people. If it's, I mean, it's perfectly possible for me to learn all of this on my own, just like anything else, but it takes time. And like I said, after all, I'm a writer, and that's what I do. And so I'm going to stick with what I know, and have my little taste of fun, but overall just stick with what I love, which is writing, because it really does have the ability to move people just as much as music, just as much as dance, just as much as drama. It really does have the people to move and call people to action in a way that is more direct, and especially since writing is the most common form of communication everywhere. Okay, writing. Speech comes second, but writing first. All right. So I'm going to wrap up this episode because the battery, something is dying. I don't know what, but something is about to die on my equipment soon. I'm sure of it. So, so I'm going to wrap this up because, see, now I know that this thing is going bonkers. Because it's starting to drift. Oh yeah, this thing, this thing right here, this gimbal. It's on its last battery, which is why it's starting to drift, I think. All right. So in any event, I'm going to wrap up this episode. I am planning a very special episode that I'm going to post for Behind the Green Screen, in which I'm going to introduce you to a little slice of my life right now. And I'm going to put that together, and hopefully I'll be able to post that this week. Okay. So take care of yourself. I know it's crazy out there, and the craziness just seems that the crazy hits just seem to keep on rolling. And I know that. And before I let you go, you know what? Never mind. Never mind. I'll bring it up in another episode. But in any event, all right. So stay safe. I know it's crazy out there, but we're going to be all right. I know it doesn't seem that way, but understand that elections are coming up. All right. And as an election officer here in my county, I am obliged to remind you that the primaries are coming up in June for certain states. Please check to see if there are any elections in your state this year. And if there are, we can correct this egregious error that's going on right now. And the way that we can do that one of the ways that we can do that is by voting. So exercise that right again, but make the right choice. Make the better choice that's going to put our country back on a path, because we are severely derailed. I think you know this. We all feel it. I can feel it. And we need to correct. So, again, check for elections in your state and vote. All right? Okay. So, until next time, I hope you're practicing Ikigai. I'm practicing it this way. I hope you find your way to practice Ikigai, and I will see you next time. Bye.